Good evening. Welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Tiana Harrison. I'm the Education and Volunteer Coordinator here at Community Homeworks. We're so glad that you are joining us. These hot summer days, we are so grateful that Mercantile Bank is so generous into sponsoring tonight's program. Tonight's program is Introduction to Hand Tools. Mr. Magnificent Mr. Lee Taylor is here. As you know, Community Homeworks is a nonprofit organization. We get our fundings from grants, gifts, and donations. So if you feel inclined or inspired to donate to us, you are welcome to do so on our website at communityhomeworks.org. As I said before, tonight's program is sponsored by Mercantile Bank. We are going to do um, Introduction to Hand Tools, and the face in the place this evening is the magnificent Mr. Taylor.
Leaving. All right. So a little different format, right? So this is Introduction to Hand Tools. So we're working on changing some things around, so I might be stumbling a little bit tonight, but we'll see. How many of you have, well, I mean, who in the audience has basic hand tools at their place? Okay. What do you got? Okay. Okay. Is there anything you have that you have, I guess, questions about as far as different types of hand tools or something along that line? You could sit up closer. You can see the if you want. I mean, and this is just a very, very small amount of hand tools.
I would say I think I see a stud finder.
Yep.
So that I have one.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I can talk about stud finders. So, anybody else? No. All right. I mean, like the class name says, this is just introduction to hand tools. This is really set up for somebody who is, they may have a few hand tools. They may have nothing. This is kind of set up to kind of get a better feel for what most homeowners are going to need, whether you're renting your home, just for general use. There are plenty of hand tools out there that are really designed for some of the, larger projects out there that most people aren't necessarily going to get into. So there is that little bit of a difference with these. What I want to say about your basic hand tools are generally, when people get them, they have a tendency, and especially in today's day and age, to go to one of the inexpensive stores. I'll leave it at that one, right? And get the most inexpensive tools that they can find. And sometimes that is perfectly fine, but there are other times when that can be a real problem. So we're going to be talking about that also. We'll be talking about some of the subtle differences and sometimes not so subtle differences in these hand tools. One of the things I do want to talk about is can you see me when I'm over here? Sure. I could lug this stuff back. One of the things I want to talk about first is the toolboxes that you're going to be hopefully getting, so you're not dragging them around in bags or whatever else like I do at home. But sometimes it's better to wait to get that toolbox until you actually have the tools. And the reason I say that is that there's variations in those tools as far as how long they are and all this sort of stuff. And, a lot of times I see people get their toolbox first and then start filling it up and realize, oh my gosh, I needed a toolbox that was, 3 inches longer or, a little deeper or had this or had that. So, when you're looking at a toolbox, some of the things you want to think about are, what are you going to be putting in there? How much are you going to be carting it around? At home, that's not usually that big of a deal, but it can be. I have a toolbox at home that's that long and like this and like this. That thing's full of tools. It's heavy. I don't want to like stretching my arm out, carrying it around. So that's one of those that, kind of keeps a lot of my stuff. I also have one of these at home that keep a lot of, my tools in play where I need them. So, you have to kind of think about how you're going to be actually using that toolbox. Whether it's plastic or metal, that doesn't really matter necessarily. Some of the details on that are, the metal toolboxes, obviously are a little more durable. A lot of times, you can find these at garage sales and stuff like that, where they're a bit old school and they can actually deal with that weight. Some of the plastic toolboxes I've seen out there, if you put more than 10, 15 pounds in it, the handle's coming off. So again, small little things to think about, but, and then how you're going to be using it. A top tray, like something like this, is actually a very nice feature. Not all of them come with it because you have a lot of small items. Either they're small and they're going to get lost, or B, they're just generally sharp or something like that. And it's the last thing you want to be doing is digging through your toolbox and finding that one sharp tool you've been looking for the hard way, So that's part of the reason that I like to kind of wait to get that toolbox. But, think about that as far as the weight, how much weight that toolbox can actually hold and how much weight you're willing to load around. Some of them have like little trays that go on the top and stuff like that for organization, all the small little things. They're nice. Sometimes they're not nice because you tip this thing up and they they go off everywhere. So, it's little details like that you want to think about as far as those toolboxes. Damage is another one. And the reason I bring that one up is, especially with these metal toolboxes, if you're working on a project, whatever it is, and you slam down a metal toolbox, there's a good chance that whatever you just slammed it down on is going to get all marred up. So, there's little details like that. I've actually done that myself where it caused more work because I had my toolbox and it was metal. I shoved it out of the way to do something. And so, yeah. That's one of those things that, I said those toolboxes, a lot of times is going to be presented to you as far as the amount of tools that you have or the type of tools that you have. So the other one is, I'm going to get into PPE at the end of this class. PPE is a personal protective gear. So that's safety glasses and stuff like that. That almost could be an entire class on its own. So we're going to swing back around to that. So some of the basics that you're going to want to have, I'll start with the tape measures. Tape measures are great. Most of the time for home use, like a 25-foot tape measure is going to be about right. So this is 25 times 1. The 1 is how wide it is. And why is that? Why do I bring that up? Well, let's say I want to hook on to something way over here and be able to take my measurement. I can do that. Versus one of these smaller ones that's like this. It's called a standout. How far can it reach without breaking? So, and it's only 12 foot long. So a lot of times I'm going to say try to avoid these because, the further you get into processes of using these hand tools, the more you're going to find out that these can be more annoying than anything. So generally I'm going to say about a 25 footer. That's usually going to be, as far as length is going to be good. You don't need like a 30, 35 footer. That's a bit of overkill. When you're picking these out, what you want to do, and a couple simple little tests that you can do, I call it a standoff test. To me, it should be able to stand out at least 6 foot. if I do that, yeah, it's obviously going to break. Some of them don't. So I look for that, and it just boils down to how it's made. The other is how, and you guys can't see this, but I call them cheaters, where you have your inch, your half inch, your quarter inch, that sort of stuff on one side, but then it's also broken down and written out on the other side. And I can pass this, actually. I can pass these around because I can grab another one. And if you look at that, you'll see as far as how it's broken down. And that's actually pretty nice because, depending on what it is that you're measuring or something along that line, it can get annoying counting out the, the eights or whatever, So that's where it makes life a lot easier to be able to do that. Some of the tape measures you're going to find will have writing on both sides. That's actually really nice because, again, you're sitting up on a ladder or something along that line and you're doing a long pull. Sometimes that tape moves a little bit. If you have that same measurement on the back side versus a blank slate, it can save you just a lot of headache and stuff. So it's a small detail that makes life real nice. There are features on these tape measures like for laying out, framing, and stuff like that. And most of the time, general homeowner use, that's not necessarily needed. The last thing, well, not the last thing. One of the other things I look at is the hold down. And what I'm getting at with that is it's designed to hold that tape out. So you can set it down and free up your hands. You're not holding it. And that's great. You should be able to get 2 fingers and be able to pull that, even while it's locked. And the reason for that is there's little prongs inside that when you push it down, it pushes down on this metal tape to stop it from retracting. There are some manufacturers out there that make them so strong that if for some reason it gets pulled, it's going to mar up the metal tape measure or it's going to bend it up. So, and that's one of the last things you want. Because once that happens, you get a weak spot in it or you get a spot that you can't read anymore. And it's kind of useless. So, like I said, that hold down, you should be able to move it even with that hold down on. As far as other details, and again, this is a personal preference. I usually look at the clips, how easy it is going to be to clip onto, whether it's a tool belt or just your pocket or whatever. Some of these are really hard to open up. You end up bending them out to be able to, have them hook. But I'll look at that also. So, like I said, relatively inexpensive tool or screwdrivers. Wow. Tape measures can have some pretty good features on them. And then, how you use them and everything else is a detail that actually we'll get into more in our other class on the hands-on part of this class, as far as not shortening their lifespan, as far as misuse, that sort of thing. So, like I said, tape measures, all different types, but those are just some of the key features to look at.
Is it possible to replace the tape on them, or you just throw them away?
Yeah, you throw them away a lot of times. I mean, I imagine it is possible, but by the time you bought it, you'd be spending probably more than you would for the tape itself. Warranty is another one. I forgot that one. There are some hand tools out there, and this warranty is kind of a blank coverage for a lot of hand tools. Certain manufacturers have like lifetime warranties on their hand tools, barring abuse and stuff like that. So sometimes looking at that can make or break your decision process as far as buying that particular hand tool. So that's something to ask about. Measuring, so we're talking about measuring. So marking is another one. Generally, You know, everybody knows good old number 2 pencil, and that's nice. Because sometimes you're getting into a little more fine detail that you need to be able to get that fine mark. And then there's what are called carpenter pencils, nice flat pencils. Usually you end up sharpening them with utility knife or something like that, but they're big, fat. So I'm making a mess all over. They're big, fat, lead in them, graphite in them, to be able to make those heavy marks and stuff. Why do you think they're flat? Simple enough, right? Or when you step on them, you don't go flying. So, but yeah, simple carpenter's pencil, number 2 pencil, and then some kind of a permanent marker, because sometimes you're working with wood or, you know, whatever that's wet or something along that line, and the pencils won't actually mark on it. So having those are extremely handy, and usually you end up having multiples because you sit on it while it's in your pocket or whatever. So you end up breaking them. So having a couple of good, being able to mark out and being able to see what it is that you marked out implements to be able to do that. So, excuse me, I had a bit of a cough. Pliers are another one. So, you know, when you talk about pliers are one of those things that kind of is a really, really, really broad range. Generally, I'm going to grab something. Generally, most people think of pliers as these guys. And you've all probably seen these. I'm like ducking on an iron side pole. So most people think of pliers as this. To be honest, I don't know how. I have a pair of these. I rarely use it. So I end up using slip joint pliers and other stuff more often. Nothing wrong with these, but it's one of those things is as you get into it, most people that start getting into it don't necessarily use these, but there's nothing wrong with having a pair like this. So your standard pliers, you can have what are called slip joint pliers. This is where you can get, you know, you can get a much bigger bite. There's variations in these. Some have a little curve in it. So if you're grabbing onto something like a pipe or something along that line, you get a better grip onto it. And there's different sizes. So there are some out there that are really small, and there are some out there that are, I have a pair at home that's about that long, right? And that just boils down to how big they can open up. Usually this size is usually what most people are going to use. The thing with that is, if you're getting a pair of these, this is where you want to watch it. You don't want to buy a cheap pair of these, because what happens with the real inexpensive pairs is this part right here that's holding these two pieces together ends up getting loose. And there is nothing more annoying than holding on to what you're trying to hold on to, because generally you're holding on to it while you're trying to do something else. And these two pieces slip side by side and pinch your hand and everything else. So that's where those inexpensive ones can be real annoying real quick. So generally I'm going to stay with a little better known brand just because of the durability and the fact that, you know, you pinch yourself a couple times and it's not nice. The other thing to think about is how big your hands are. And why do I say that? Well, if you're grabbing onto something, and this technically, you know, I can have it so it's opened up, say, that much to be able to grab something that's, you know, that's close to 4 inches wide, right? The issue is can I get my hands around that? If it were a larger one, longer one, yes, I would be able to. For smaller, so you have to think about that, because I've seen people where they get a small version of this and they just can't get their hands around it to be able to actually get a good grip on that. So there's details to think about with that. But like I said, generally that size is about right. And usually you want 2 of them. As weird as that sounds, but it's one of those things where you get into situations where you're needing one to be able to adjust it, and you're needing another one to be able to, hold one side while you're working with the other side type thing. So generally, two of these is preferable, I guess. So that's slip joint pliers. You have, locking pliers, you can actually adjust this here to be able to open or close the teeth, and then it closes down. And there it goes. Closes down and actually locks on it. The idea on that is it frees up your hands so that you can do something else. And then you got a little press release here to be able to open it back up. A lot of people call them vice grips. Vice grips is actually a brand, but locking pliers. And like I said, that size usually works out just about right. So I've seen some where they're really small, and I haven't found a use for those ones yet. Somebody might have. So a pair of locking pliers is nice. And then you have, there are so many, you have needle nose pliers. Those are nice. And again, they come in all different lengths and sizes and everything else. There's one in there that's about that long. So they're all over the place. But, a pair of needle nose pliers is nice to have. The thing about hand tools really is, if there is an issue of how to do something or how to do something easier, or how to be able to conquer a task, there's probably a hand tool that's made for it. And this is why hand tools are so varied. There's so many varieties of them. There's thousands and thousands of different hand tools out there, and then the variations on one particular type. So that's kind of like, well, all we can do is really touch on it. As far as some people call these are adjustable wrenches, where you can adjust to whatever size that you need and be able to use those. With that, what you want usually is, like I said, one about this length. The longer the length, the more leverage you're going to have to be able to do whatever it is that you're working on. But the issue is that the longer it is, the harder it's going to be able to get in those tight spaces, and you'll find yourself in those situations, usually more often than not, where the hand tool that you have is just not going to fit where you need it to. So that's where having a smaller version is nice. So, that's something to kind of keep in mind. And it's usually one of those things that you don't really learn until you're in that situation, and you're just like, oh, and you go to the store, I need a smaller one. So that's usually how it boils out. So, so all different types of pliers or adjustable wrenches are nice to be able to have. Putty knives are one of those, and I did. I'm losing my mind. Putty knives are another one. And again, if you're doing, spackling nail holes or, whatever. So putty knives are one of those tools that the more you use it, the more you find out that you can actually do with it. So usually what I'll say with the putty knife is I like the thinner ones, because you start getting into too wide, there's an issue of you can't dip it into the container that you're trying to work out of. You're scooping it out with your finger and sticking it on there, and then, that can be a pain. So generally, I'm going to say, 2.5 inch, somewhere in that thing, as far as the width goes. To me, that little bit of flex that's in that tool is going to make life a lot easier, as far as how whatever it is that you're using that putty knife for is going to be applied. How much more work it is going to be, or less work, just because of that flexibility. So one that has a little bit of flex in it, it's not too terribly wide. Again, you get into the wider ones, and now you're talking drywall, mud, and stuff like that. That's a whole other set of hand tools. There are putty knives out there. This is actually what do they call this? They call it the painter's tool, 5-in-1 tool. But some people use this as a putty knife also, which is part of what it's designed for. It's also designed to be able to clean out your rollers after you're done painting, or scrape with this point. You know, when you get a can of paint and it gets all that goo in there and that lip, that's what that's for. Get in there, clean that up. So he said painter's tool, but it's still technically kind of a putty knife. And it's a little heavier putty knife. So with a tool like this, you know, if I'm having to scrape something, I'm not too worried about it. Versus a thin one like this, if I'm trying to scrape something real hard, there's a good chance I'm going to put dings in it. And then it's going to be issues down the line as far as I'm leaving streaks or whatever it is. So a variety of different putty knives, and that it really boils down to what you're thinking about doing. So, but putty knives are one of those that are very nice to have. Allen wrenches. Do y'all have the outline? Okay, you do. Allen wrenches are one of those things that anytime you're putting together, boxed desk or bookshelf or something along that line, you're going to find that you need them because yes, they'll send the Allen wrench or the mini screwdriver or whatever else along with it, but you'll realize fast that the metal that they use is like the softest metal they could find on the planet, and you slip once and it's rounded off and it doesn't work anymore. So having a decent pair of Allen wrenches is a nice thing. They sometimes they come on the ring like it's showing on the picture here. I like the ones that are part of a handle that you open up. They have those styles. The only reason I like that is you can't really lose the one, and most of the time you're not going to get into that situation where you need to have that individual one. So it keeps them together. It keeps them from getting lost. Main thing is have a metric set, have a, imperial set, as far as standard and metric, because again, the one time you need the metric, you may not have it. So, having those two styles of Allen wrenches is pretty important, and probably more important than you would think as far as, homeowners, as far as what they're going to be putting together. A lot of times do require that sort of stuff. And again, this is another one of those tools where you want to watch that price point on them, because again, if you get the cheapest one, you're getting the cheapest one. And will they last? Probably not. So you're looking at how hard that metal is, that sort of stuff.
Can you explain what you mean by the metric and imperial in regards to the Allen wrench? Is that what you're-
Yeah. So I mean, so you have one that says metric, and most of the time, this is standard. This is standard. So you're going to have a set that's here. You're going to have a set that's metric, and that's the size that a lot of the, you put it together sort of tables or bookshelves and stuff like that. They come from overseas. They use a metric system. We don't. So that's what I'm getting at there. Because what a lot of people will do is they'll say, "Oh, I only have one set. I don't have a metric set," and they'll find one that's close, and they try to get it in there, and it will work, sort of, until it doesn't. They're not there. Both of those are standard. So yeah, I didn't pull all those out. So, but yeah, it'll say metric on it. I mean, so you just want to have a metric set. You really do. Because again, people will try to make a standard one work in a pinch, and it just doesn't end well usually. So you end up either stripping the tool or stripping the bolt or the screw or whatever else it is that you're trying to put in. So having those two sizes are nice. Goofy as it sounds, some kind of a little metal razor scraper This is a nice little one because it has a little cover. Remember we were talking about those tools that you'll find the hard way buried in your toolbox. This is one of them. So this is a nice little, I feel like I'm way back. This is a nice little detail. You can buy these, these razor blades, use them however you need to. What they're designed to do is when you're done with them, they go in this way, upside down, so you're not finding that blade buried in, because that will pop off. But having, some kind of a razor scraper is nice, because it's going to deal with a lot of the things that you're going to run across as far as cleaning glass or whatever it is that you need to use. Small little detail on those. If you are scraping something, especially glass, spray it down with a little soapy water first, and it's going to make so it's not going to scratch that glass. So we could pass that guy around. And I mean, there's nice ones like that. There's metal ones. There's little cheapy ones that are about that big. I would say with that one, make sure you can flip it around though, so that it doesn't. You can't put the lid on it, can you? Yeah. See, details, right? So there's all these little weird things. So yeah, some kind of a scraper, retractable, or something that has a cover, or something you can flip that blade around. It makes life a lot easier. We talked about the Sharpie already. Flat bars, and we're having the hands-on class first Tuesday of September. Yeah. So a flat bar, and it's at there's a ton of different varieties of these. This is one of these tools. Thank you. This is one of these tools that the more you use it, the more you realize that it can do, right? Its basic function is prying in to be able to take off, say, like trim or something along that line. But then you find out later that, oh my gosh, it's got a little teardrop thing so I can pull nails. Or it's, some of them are a long one that have a little bend on it, so that it makes it so that if I want to lift something and I'm by myself, I can put it. See, I'm drifting already. It has this bend that's kind of a fulcrum point, so I can put it on the floor and it will pivot on that point, so I can put my foot on it and help lift something up. Yeah, I mean, they can do a lot of different things. So a flat bar is one of those that the more you use it, the more you realize that you're happy you got it. One little note I will add with that is it doesn't really matter as far as length and stuff. This is the most common 12-inch as far as the length goes. There are flat bars out there that are really thin. A lot of people call them gasket scrapers, and you usually find them, the ones I'm thinking of in particular, usually in automotive stores. And they're designed to scrape gaskets off if you're doing automotive work, but they work really nice for trim. But then here's the thing. If you had a painter's tool, let's say you're trying to get into like behind trim, right? And you want to pull it off because you want to insulate your window or you want to do whatever. If you were to use this big, thick guy right here and pound it in, it's going to do a lot of damage to your walls, right? Versus something thinner. And back to this painter's tool. Yeah, I can get this painter's tool because it's stout enough where I can, and it's thin enough where I can get in there and just wiggle a little bit, then bring in the heavier one to be able to do the hard work. So having those thinner tools, sometimes those thinner flat bars, can make life a lot easier and actually make it so that you're minimizing how much, in a sense, damage you're creating with your tool. Because you can create quite a bit of damage with a tool that's not correct for the project that you're working on. So flat bars are one of those that you get into and you find out that they are really handy. I can't get into all the projects I've done with flat bars. So nail sets are one of those that if you're doing basically what these nail sets are for, are to be able to sink those nails, mainly for trim. You're putting trim up after you've done whatever, and I'm talking hand nailing, right, where you actually have the nails, and you don't want to have those heads of those nails sticking out. So then you have various sizes. I'll pass these guys around. Thank you. Various sizes on the ends, and you'll see how there's basically 3 different sizes to be able to sink that nail in so that you can fill it with putty or whatever, so you don't see it later. So it makes it so you're not having hammer marks on whatever it is, and it makes so you can sink those in. And that's one of those too that the more you use it, the more you're like, oh my gosh, yeah, I can use this for popping pins in the hinges. I can use this for all sorts of things. But back to the other issue as far as the metal goes, any tool that you strike, I don't care if it's a chisel, a cold chisel, a nail set, whatever. It does one of 2 things. Thank you. Either it does what's called mushrooming, and what that means is you have, whatever it is, and your striking surface over time starts to bulge out because, again, you're just hitting it, right? And it's a soft metal. And what will happen is eventually these pieces break off and they come flying at you, right? So that's one thing. Mushrooming, usually how I can tell with that, I look at the striking surface or this surface. I'm going to run my hand this way, and you'll feel that bulge on it, right? And it doesn't mean that it's junk. You just get a file or something like that and knock off those ends, and it makes it so that you don't have that issue anymore, because that does hurt if you get one of those pieces of metal in your eye. So, mushrooming is common with tools that you strike. The other is if they're too hard, they will or can shatter, and that can be a real bad thing. So again, if you're buying a tool that you're going to be hitting, don't buy the cheapest tool. And we're going to get into this in various parts. Back to these guys here. I've seen it where an inexpensive one, I talked about how these 2 ends are put together, but also pressure points as far as these breaking off because it's inexpensive metal. So small details to think about. So nail sets are a nice one to have. Levels. So levels are one of those things that most people should have. Usually they have you have small little, these are called torpedo levels, has a little magnet on it. Believe me, that makes a huge difference. This will do a lot of the small work that you're going to do around the house. Little 2-footer like this is if you need a little bit more accuracy. And I guess the easiest way to think about what length level you need is using the longest one that you can for the job. So here's an example, right? So let's say I'm plumbing something like a door or something. I'm putting a door in, and all I have is this, and I put it up, and I'm plumbing it up, right? Is it going to read true? Usually not, because it's so short. This is going to read a little bit better. A 6-foot level is going to read even better. So does that make sense? As far as the larger the tool or the larger the thing that you're trying to plumb or level, the more accuracy you're going to get. So, but like I said, for homeowner use, generally a little torpedo like this, a 2-footer, are going to do just fine. Some of the details that I like, I talked about the magnet already. Another detail and you can see it with this one right here, and my wife can attest to this one. I'll let you pass it around. Is sometimes you're doing something on the ground, right? And if you look at those, there's a sight on the top of it, because there's nothing worse than putting it down and then going, oh, hold on, and bending over to be able to see where's that bubble, right? So, a small detail like that makes a huge difference, and it doesn't really change the price. It's just out there, right? So, when I'm looking at one, right, that's one of the things I'm going to look for. The magnet frees up a hand. Any tool that can free up a hand is a good tool, right? So small details like that make the levels nice. Let's say you find a level at a garage sale, or you have an old level at home, and you're not quite sure if it's accurate anymore because they get dropped and all this sort of stuff, and these vials can get a little cockeyed, right? And then it's not reading right. And so you're not quite sure, is my level reading right? You can't necessarily count on something being level or plumb. So what you can do if you have an older one and you want to see if it's reading accurately, take your old one into the store and say, this is mine. They'll tag it or whatever. Put the brand new level right on it, set it down, and if both bubbles read the same, you're in good shape. If they don't, you might need a new level at that point. So it's a nice way to be able to check. Simple, that sort of stuff. So, levels are pretty important, actually. So there is one in here that's called a framing square, and I did not drag that out, but there is a picture of it. You probably know. Oh, there it is. It's hiding over there. That's one of those tools. Thanks, Jason. Yeah. Thank you. So that's one of these tools that is made for if you're framing a house or something along that line. Most of the time, people aren't going to need this. Doesn't hurt if you have one, but for the most part, usually homeowners aren't going to be getting into what this does. But framing square. Nice part about it is this part here. You know why this is? Same width as dimensional lumber, 1.5 inches. So small details like that. But again, you're not getting into framing a house and stuff. So a framing square was not necessarily replaced, but this was another type of square. They call this a speed square. For the most part, it can do just about everything this does. It fits in your toolbox. Whether it's made of plastic or metal, that doesn't really matter. Most homeowners are going to be using these for the 90-degree sort of thing. There are tricks you can do with this where if I want to cut a 2x4 and I want to make sure that cut is not crooked or anything else like that, I can put it onto the 2x4 and have my drill my circular saw run on the side of this and give me a nice 90-degree cut. You could build a house with this if you wanted to. They said the owner's manual that comes with it is about that thick. So this can do a lot. And if you're into that, great. Go for it. But like I said, a lot of times people, thanks.
Why is it called a square?
I've asked that question. I never got a straight answer, man. They say just because. Jason brings up a good point though. It's weird as far as the tools, hand tools especially, depending on where in the country you are or, what background they had, there's going to be like 20 different names of the same tool. So that's one of those things that you just have to kind of get adjusted to, there's the technical name and then there's the generic name, so that just kind of boils down to who was using them and how old the person was when they were using them, because there are tool names out there that I couldn't say today. Saved my life because I'd get shot. So yeah, it's weird depending on all sorts of things as far as what the name of the tool is. On that note, the reason I get to that is if you have one that's damaged or something along that line, you just take a picture of it. If you don't know exactly the name of it, because if you go into the store and you say, I need the tool that does this, and they're going, we have about 5,000 tools. So which one are you talking about? Right. So take a picture of it and you can be able to match it up to be able to replace it. Because again, those names are all over the place. The T-square is similar to, sitting over there. The T-square is similar to the framing square. That's mainly for drywall and stuff like that. And again, this is going to be a modification. We're going to probably change that. Or cutting like large sheet goods, plywood, OSB, that sort of stuff, to be able to get a nice long continuous 90-degree cut or measurement or something along that line. So that's one of those oddball ones that I'm not quite sure why it's in here. Flashlight, definitely worth it. The one thing I'm going to talk about with flashlights is, as goofy as it sounds, now they're all LEDs. That's nice. But a little detail I like to make sure of is, that it doesn't blink like that. So I can stand it up like that. And the main reason is that, again, it frees up a hand. You're not holding it in your mouth while you're underneath the sink. You can set it down right next to you and be able to see and work and everything else. Plus this one, durable. It's got that rubber. I'm going to drop it or something like that. I'm not going to break a tool again. You can drop it and it's going to survive that drop, type thing. So, a flashlight is one of those that's very well. And again, that's personal preference. Some people love the headlamps they can put on and clip to their hat or whatever. There's nothing wrong with that. Some people don't wear a hat. Or some people don't want something stuck to their head. I mean, it just is, it's a personal preference thing, but it's always nice to be able to see. So, however it is you want to see, great. That's right. Usually you get into that situation where you're in that position. Duct tape. Yep. You can never go wrong with having duct tape or electrical tape, something along that line. WD-40 is one of those that is extremely handy. And I'll touch on this with metal tools. You can see how sometimes they flash rust on you, depending on where you're keeping them, damp environments or whatever. And I've seen it where they get so encrusted with just corrosion, they don't work anymore. So usually what I'll say is that once a year or something along that line, you get a little rag, a little oil, WD-40 or something, and just wipe a light coat onto that metal tool. And it's going to make it so it's not going to flash rust as much. I even get to the point where you have those little moisture packets that you always get in various things. I save those and throw them in my toolbox, and it helps suck up that moisture so your tools aren't getting beat up. So little things like that, but some kind of a penetrating oil is always nice to be able to have. And I'm going to run out of time before I know it. The one thing I did miss, hammers. Hammers are one of those that, so they're broken up in a couple of different ways. They're broken up in weight. That's one of the ways they're broken up. This is a 16 ounce. This is a 19 ounce, right? The heavier the hammer, the fewer swings you have to be able to take to be able to sink a nail. Usually those heavier hammers and the longer handled hammers are designed for people who are out in the field every day using it all day long, because they don't want to be going tap, tap, tap to be able to drive a nail. So generally, I'd say for home use, about a 16 ounce is good, right? If that's too heavy for you, you can tone it down a little bit. I would still want that length though on that handle. That's about an average length right there. You'll find those kits that have the hammer. It's about that long. Personal preference, but I've not found good luck with those usually. The other is the head of the hammer, this part. And I'll pass these guys around. I'll put my wife to work. Thanks. You have one that has the hash marks in it. And that is called a waffle head. That is designed mainly for framing. And it's not necessarily great for home use because, again, back to that trim project, say, that you're going to leave that nail sticking out just a little bit so you can use your nail set to be able to set it in. You accidentally hit that wood, and all of a sudden you have this big old waffle pattern on it or in your wall or whatever. So generally for home use, you don't want that. Just a smooth face will work out just fine. The other is the claw of the hammer. So this is the claw right here. And you can see that this style here, this is the curved claw versus this style. I don't know if you guys can see it, that pole right there is a little bit sticking out a little bit more versus this guy right here that's straight. This is called a rip claw. If you have a choice, pick that style of claw because it will open up a lot of opportunities. It does everything that this does, just about 10 times better. It's a small. It's one of those things that, okay, so let's say I have a nail that I need to pull, right? With this design, I have to really get it down here and hook onto it, right? With this design, or even one like this, I can hook onto it and have my handle up here instead of way down, right? I can use it if I'm digging, right? And I need to use my claw to be able to cut out a root or whatever. It's just, there are a lot of reasons why. Generally, this is just, you're going to find that this is just handier to have. And it's a small detail, but it's one of those things that the more you use it, the more you go. You're saying as far as, is there a cost difference between these two styles as far as the heads go, the claws go? It doesn't necessarily change. The style of the head doesn't necessarily change the price. Usually you're going to be paying for how it feels, the brand name, how, there's certain ones that are really set up to where certain people, that's all they use, right? They can vary all over the place. But again, you're looking at a tool you're going to be using as a striking tool, and you're also going to be using it as a prying tool. So back to that good old metal thing. And I've seen this happen where somebody is hooked onto this trying to pry something out. You're usually up on a ladder, and that metal fails and breaks, and they go. So, yeah, 20-ish. This one? This one? These can get up to 50, 60 bucks. But these are framing hammers. Well, I don't recommend a certain hammer. What I'm getting at is you want to look at the weight, usually 16 ounces or so, and I'm not answering your question. Okay.
How much does the hammer that has the straight claw?
Yep.
How much does one of those run on the low?
Yeah, just the standard. Yeah, $20 range. It depends on where you're finding a sale or something along that line. But again, watch it. I don't get those super cheap ones. That's just not good. There's a lot more details I could get into. You have wooden handles, you have fiberglass handles, you have pure metal ones, right? And again, this boils down to personal preference. Most of the time, if I'm going to say, there's one that's actually good for general use, I'm going to say the fiberglass. And that mainly is that your wood handles has a tendency to shrink or break or something along that line with mishits and whatnot. The metal ones can just be flat out heavy, right? So the fiberglass ones, generally for general home use, is usually about the best. But again, if you're buying a hammer, you have to hold it. You have to see how it feels because it really boils down to that. And you ask somebody what hammer is best, and you're going to get 1,000 different answers. But I'm just talking about as far as how you use them or what you use them for. Got about 3 minutes left if you're willing to go over. Screwdrivers. So generally for the home use, you're going to have 6-in-1. Pass that guy around. They call it a 6-in-1 because you can pull this out and you have your small Phillips and your flathead. And it also gives you a small, like a 1/4-inch nut driver on this side. And then you have the same on the other side. Your Phillips, your flat. And then this also is a nut driver. And there are ones out there that are 10-in-1s where they have a little piece that you pull out and the socket part flips around and it changes the size of that socket. So like I said, 6-in-1s generally are going to be nice because they're just eliminating a lot of different unnecessary weight and space. So something like that is great. I will say that if you're going to have 6-in-1 or something, excellent. Have a couple long-handled screwdrivers like this, and this can boil down to something as simple as I don't want to stick my hand in a cold tank of water if I have to, say, snug my bowl down on my toilet because it won't reach with this, or I just can't reach something, right? So having a longer screwdriver, Phillips and flathead is handy. And then having a set of what I call stubbies, because again, you're going to get into situations where you just don't have the room. And even something like this is not going to fit in there. So I generally have a couple of long ones, a few short ones, and then something like a 6-in-1. The other is, and we have those, a lot of people call them eyeglass or jewelers. This is a relatively large size. But again, back to I put a towel bar up, and it's got a little teeny weeny set screw that none of these screwdrivers are going to fit. So I have these that will. So, even just a small little set. And sometimes you can find them in something that's sort of similar to the 6-in-1 where you can flip these pieces around and be able to, put whatever size you need. Because again, you're going to run into that situation where you're going to need some kind of a set screw, usually Phillips or flathead, that is so small that your standard screwdrivers is just not going to be able to get in there. Again, jeweler set, I've called them that. There's not even a name on this one. Miniature screwdriver set. I mean, some of them are down to super small, And a lot of times people, they call them that because they would fix their eyeglasses with them, So some kind of a very small screwdriver, and even if this is a basic flathead Phillips head, that will usually get you to what you need. And again, with the hand tools, some of the other things that you would like usually are handy, and it depends on what you get into. Some kind of a basic socket set. A lot of people think, "Oh, I'm not a mechanic. I'm not going to be doing whatever." But how often are we using a socket set at home? When I'm not a mechanic either. So, a simple basic socket set, even if it's something simple like this, great. You're going to find yourself, going back to that over and over again. Utility knives are another one that, to me, are probably one of the most handy. The one thing I do want to point out with these is that you're going to find ones out there that are in the permanent open position. Back to that finding it the hard way in the bottom of your toolbox. That sucks. So you want it to be able to retract, and you want it to be able to change that blade out easily. And the reason I'm getting at that is that with this style, you have to unscrew it, and I'm hiding behind the post on right. You have to unscrew it, take it apart, get the blade, flip it around, right? And that old adage of a dull blade is a dangerous blade, right? And it really is true. If you get one that's complicated to be able to change out, usually that blade's not going to get changed out. So there are varieties out there that some of them open up like this with a push of a button, and you can change that blade out. There are other varieties like this that I always have on me. It's a lock blade, and I can change my blade out just like that to a fresh blade and be able to keep it in my pocket or in my toolbox. But yeah, utility knives, that's, to me, that's like the top 5 of the tools that you usually get into of needing. So, and again, we've only barely scratched the surface, but like I said, if there's an issue, there's a problem, there is a hand tool out there that is designed to be able to conquer that problem. So I think I went through it.
We are always so excited when you present to us because there is such a wealth of knowledge that is included with you.
Excuse me.
I wanted to take the time to thank everyone that tuned in. I wanted to especially thank the people that were able to come to us in person. Wanted to encourage our online viewers to visit us on Tuesdays. Our classes start at 6 p.m. at 812 Bryant Street. Wanted to also thank Mercantile Bank for being our community sponsor this month. We will see you guys next Tuesday. Thank you.